Hello, and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have Justin Freishtat with me. Justin is, he exited and sold a business called Heartland Foods, and he's also the founder of a hedge fund. And one of the things that I think you're going to hear in his journey today is how if you really focus on all of the different moments in your life that were learning lessons and opportunities to learn from, then you'll be able to apply them throughout your entire career. So Justin, thanks so much for being on today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Happy to do this, and let's dive into this thing.
Yeah. So to start your journey, you fell in love with hockey at a young age. So talk a little about getting introduced to the sport and what it was about the sport that you really enjoyed.
Man, I think it was the speed, the action, the excitement, right? I was playing all sports when you're a kid, trying to figure out which one's gonna be the one. And it was between baseball and hockey. Those were the two that I was pretty good at. And I was actually probably a little better at baseball. I probably would have gone further with that, but it was just too slow and boring for me. So, yeah, hockey was the path.
I love it. Now, as you were playing hockey and growing up, you also had a dad who was a very entrepreneurial-minded person. So talk a little about, being young and seeing that element of a career potential for somebody.
Yeah, I think it's extremely valuable to have an entrepreneurial parent, right? You get to see the ups and downs of it. You get to live vicariously through it. And of course, good parenting, instilling good values in your kids. So yeah, for me, watching him, how hard he worked in business, that's how hard I worked at hockey. And then eventually, later in life, that translates to what you want to do in your professional career when, you find out you're not going to the NHL.
Yes, but before you found that out, you were excelling at hockey and you end up getting to play in college. So talk a little bit about, what prompted you to want to play in college and then also just pursuing that endeavor.
Yeah, hockey was actually the only reason why I got into college. I think I had a 1.9 GPA, played juniors in between my senior year of high school and before going into college. I had 1 year of that semi-pro type going for it, and then usually it's either you're getting drafted or you're just going to go finish it out in college. So that's what I did. It got me into an honors university. I had no business being there from the education perspective, and 6 years of just switching majors, couldn't figure anything out. I never even graduated.
Now, while you were in college, though, you decided to start trying some door-to-door sales, and door-to-door sales is not for the faint of heart. It is going to teach you a lot about, grit, tenacity, work ethic. So talk a little bit about those beginning years and getting into, door-to-door sales and what you learned from that.
What's interesting? I normally, when I do these, say that's where it started, but it actually started a couple years before that in college because I was a music major and had the recording studios, and instead of doing my work, I just saw an opportunity to start recording all the rappers on campus, making money. I was charging by the hour in a school studio, which I'm pretty sure is not legal. And, so that was really my first, I guess, business, you could say, kind of hustling around campus, making money, doing that. And then, eventually that's going to fizzle out in the summers. That's when I started doing door knocking. I saw, hey, these guys are making six figures. And at the time it was like $100,000. That's like, wow, if I could ever make $100,000 in a year, that would be the dream. So yeah, I just dove into it. I was terrible. Kind of like hockey, like genetically, I just never really had, those gifted skills. Everything had to be developed. So yeah, going door to door, getting your face kicked in, getting yelled at by adults when you're 18, 20 years old, 22, it's definitely something I recommend everybody do, no matter how weak you feel in your brain. That is something, if you can push through, will make you just thick-skinned for whatever you do the rest of your life.
That's really good. Now, something that I thought was interesting, is you went through an injury in hockey, and that, unfortunately kind of determined, that hockey was going to be done, but you were able to pivot that energy, right? The competitive edge into now business. So talk a little about that element for you, taking a lot of what you had already learned in hockey, but now repurposing it for, a career in sales.
Yeah, I was super depressed. I really, especially because I just kept failing academically. I literally just couldn't get through class, couldn't do homework, couldn't test. And now it's like, all right, hockey's over. It's the only reason why I'm in college. So now I gotta, really buckle up and figure out what I'm gonna do with my life. And then, when you get those first commissions, you're getting all those no's. But then it's like, okay, wait a minute. This is just another game I can learn how to play and try to get great at it. And then you end up where you want to be. So for me, it just kind of made sense. It was a natural progression of pay for performance. Mm-hmm. Or, you would see things, people, work their whole careers somewhere, think they're getting a pension, they get laid off, and it's out of their control. I never really wanted to be in a situation where my results were half dependent on corporate politics and half on my acumen. So the beautiful thing about 100% commission is there's no debating your worth. It's either you performed, you got exactly what you expected out of the transaction, or you got nothing. And that made a lot of sense to me, and it kept me engaged every day. If I had a salary, I literally would not know how much effort to put in. It would be the weirdest thing for me to comprehend in my brain.
Yeah. Now, the flip side, there's a lot of people that are nervous to start a business. They're, afraid to step into a career where you have variable pay. And I think for so many, the fear of what it could look like is more intimidating or more fearful than what the reality is. But if you never get started, you don't find that out. So talk to, someone that's listening right now that is maybe in the W-2 or the salaried world. They've always thought, man, I could be good at that, but they've just been a little nervous to take that first step. What would be a word of encouragement to someone that's in that phase or season of life?
Yeah, you would think that later on it would be harder to do it because, maybe you've got kids, maybe whatever, right? It could be more challenging, but the way that I would look at it is if I've got a solid W-2 that floats my efforts and pays my bills, that means outside of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., I can put in all my effort into the next thing, right? Which is what's going to be required anyways if you go into this world. You don't get to just work 9 to 5, right? We were talking about before we started this podcast, like on Thanksgiving, I'm going to be doing some work on Zoom internationally because America's closed, right? I'm looking for more ways to work. So if you're the type of person that's like, no, I want my weekend, I just want to hit 9 to 5, forget it. But if you really lose sleep over what could be, I know I can do more, from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. every day, you can get a lot accomplished. And the beautiful thing about having a W-2 is that when you start your LLC and you have startup costs and you're investing in this next thing, guess what? That comes right off the taxes that you were going to pay the government anyways in your W-2. So in a way, the government will fund your side hustle until it becomes the main thing.
I love that. Love that. Now, to go back to the door-to-door sales, there's a lot of different things one could do door-to-door sales on, but the business that you were a part of, the family business, was selling freezers and meat packages to different individuals. So talk a little bit about, I think for anyone to be good in a sales capacity, you have to be passionate about it, right? If you're not believing in the product, it's really tough to have success there. So talk a little about, one, where your passion came from with that product, but two, maybe one or two stories that really stand out to you of either, all right, I'm going to be good at this, or, man, this is tough.
Yeah, you do need to be a subject matter expert, and there's a lot of ways to be a salesperson. I would rather sell from an educational perspective and get someone's trust that I am the absolute expert in my field than to get really great at sales and lines of questioning and tactics and closing skills. I'm not saying you don't need those things, but often you will never have to use them if you just become absolutely proficient in whatever it is you're doing. So I started, in the beginning, just learning the basics, and then it got really interesting because I'm really into health and wellness. I started learning about pasture rotation. There's hundreds of breeds of cattle, and they taste different, and then how old is the animal when it goes to harvest, all these things that go into what a quality product is. And that's the perspective I sold from, is really educating the consumer on why this is so much better, what's available to them now, and then you take a little bit of a gap when you're selling a product that somebody's already paying for, and you ask them to pay just a little bit more for something that's 10x better. I was closing at 87% once, I'm 5+ years in, and I've heard every objection that there possibly is. I know exactly what to say, but the amount of people who will quit before they get to that hockey stick moment where you start to crush it, that's the difference of who's winning and who isn't.
Now, there's two things that I want to ask about from what you just said there. One is, I think so many times people get fearful of the objection opposed to realizing that the objection is really the key to the sale, right? Like if I can understand why you're potentially not wanting to do this, well, then I just need to figure out how to answer it and help you see the value in doing this, right? So talk a little bit about, kind of sales world, really understanding that the objection is not the no, right? It's really that this is where you need to answer their real problem to get them to the yes.
Yeah, I want to give a different perspective on that.
Yeah.
That the objection is education. It's
Yeah.
education for you to realize what's going to come up anyways and learn how to bring it up on your own terms in advance, get ahead of it, and crush it before it ever happens. Objections are only happening when you don't know everything that can happen in your sales process and you don't tackle that stuff in advance so that you get to the end and they're like, man, like, I got nothing to ask. Let's do it. It should be a no-brainer at the end. If you find yourself battling at the end of all your sales calls, you just need to take the feedback and learn and start to build your presentation off of getting ahead of it. Because nobody likes answering objections, even if you're amazing at sales. So I'd rather say the thing that you're scared of that you don't want to come up that you're hiding from, no, learn how to bring that up on your terms so that way you don't get stuck in an objection fight at the end.
That's really good. Now, in addition, so the meat is not just meat. It's very, farm to table type of meat, right? It's more on the organic side. And I think although it's changed a little bit today in regards to like the cost relative to other costs, I think it's become a little bit closer to, normal costs. There still is an increase in what you're paying for that. And I think for so many people, they look at it as, well, it just cost me more today versus, but if I keep going down this route, the health costs that I might have down the road are way more than the extra, $6 for the meat instead of, $60 or $600, right, for a doctor's visit. So talk a little bit about that for just someone listening and wanting to get into, maybe a different way of eating or a different way of health life and, really valuing the cost today versus potential backside costs in the future.
Yeah, I think if people really understood the true consequence of what's happening, when you eat food that's not organic and it's been sprayed with glyphosate, let's just think about what that does, right? The whole point of spraying glyphosate on crops is so that you can kill all the bugs except for the GMO product that you're creating. So if it kills everything in the field, what do you think it's going to do to your gut microbiome when you consume it, right? Yeah. So we have all these gut issues, and it's like you get your health to a point where you've got leaky gut and you can't even absorb nutrients. So what if you start eating healthy, right? You can't even accept the nutrition. So I think you really got to look at, what's going to happen if I don't take these things seriously. And the health and wellness world has changed dramatically now. We have miracle peptides that just can absolutely change and fix you, but at the end of the day, though, you have to have the healthy habits. You got to walk 45 minutes a day, right? You got to count your macros. Most people don't even know what that means. And I think that education piece, if you really, I used to do this in-home sales. It wasn't just all about the food. It was like, hey, do you know what macros are? This is how you track it when you get the food, right? Let's figure out what your basal metabolic rate is, and then I can cut and pack the food to spec. Nobody else was giving that type of service, right? They were just selling the food. So that's the difference. Is like, what value adds can you give your clients that you don't have to enhance their experience?
Well, and the thing that I like about that too is when you become more knowledgeable, you understand the why behind it, right? I think so many people, for example, if I show up to my, car dealership and they say, well, Phil, you got two options, you got this one or this one, and I say, all right, what's the price differential and what's it going to do for me? And they go, it's about the same, but this one's $50 less. It's like, well, then I'm always going to do the one that costs less. Like, why would I pay more for roughly the same thing? But what I probably don't know, not being a car expert, is, well, if I did the $50 more one, my car runs more efficiently or, whatever it is, and it gives me a longer lifetime with the car.
Yep. And it's also back to the food thing, right? Someone says, well, I can get organic from the grocery store. Yeah, but what type of packaging do they put it in? What BPAs and phthalates are you going to consume? So it's organic, but then they ruin it, right? So if we've got BPA-free, phthalate-free packaging, we're not only protecting you in the farming, but also in the transportation, the packing, and we're flash freezing it. It kills any aerobic bacteria and anaerobic bacteria gets addressed too. So it's always deeper than what people think, and you have to educate them deep on the differences.
I love it. Now, for you, what was the original inspiration to get so into the macros and all the different elements? Was it the business side? Was it your health for hockey? Talk a little bit about what, really got you going there.
It was definitely post-hockey. That's what's hilarious is when I was an athlete, it wasn't happening at all. I was eating fast food all day. I had no education at all about it. And I was a really ignorant kid, right? Like my dad would give me books on, I remember he gave me, Craig Laughlin gave me Hockey Tough, and I didn't read it. I'm like, this guy's an ex-NHLer. He's giving me the path, and I didn't listen, right? So that's good lessons is eventually I started listening and diving into that stuff.
That's great. Now, for you, as the business grows, you are not only doing your sales, but then you start running or managing a team. And I think so frequently we hear, oh, you're good at sales, you'll be a great manager. And I think oftentimes that's not the case. A person that's really good at sales doesn't want to have to worry about someone else, right? They just want to go crush it in their lane, and all of a sudden they view managing others as taking away their time from being able to crush it in their lane. So talk about that transition for you of going from not just being your sales, but then also managing people, and maybe some of the mental and emotional strain that put on you.
Yeah, no, that was definitely me. I was absolutely just a one-lane A player. Leave me alone. Let me go crush it, right?
Yeah.
That's what I did for a long time. So when I did start recruiting people and building teams and managing, I was terrible at it. It's a completely different skill set. I would have no accountability in my sales team. Everybody would just do the bare minimum because I thought that everybody would just follow and I could just lead by example and that was it, right? It never worked that way. So eventually I got better at it. And, it's just like what it took to get great at sales. It took the same thing to get good at managing people. So at every break point of your life or your business, you're going to have to get back into that process of, I suck at this. It's going to take some time to get great at it. People just aren't willing to suck.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's something to be said about that. And, one of my favorite books is the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, right?
Yeah.
And so frequently, our desire to be proficient and masters of something then almost makes us feel like I don't want to be a beginner at anything else, right? Well, if I've mastered this, I should just be able to master all things. And it's like, well, no, if you want to continue to level up and grow throughout your life, you're going to need to say yes to new things. But that means when you say yes to something new, oftentimes you're not going to be great at it from the get-go.
Yep, and letting people go when they're not accountable. One of the hardest things for me. Definitely. It still doesn't feel great when you do it, but you're actually doing these people a favor. If they can't perform in the role, you need to set them free so they can go find where they can be great.
Absolutely. Now, within that, I always think there's this tough balancing act in a leadership capacity because, like you said, most people aren't willing to do what it takes to get to 5 years down the road to master something. And at the same token, you can't let someone stick around for 5 years that isn't good for the culture. They're not, willing to work and adopt to what you're trying to teach them. So what's kind of that balancing act of time where you're like, all right, I'm looking for these key things because I don't know about you, but one of my downsides is I can see the good in somebody. And I'm like, if they would just do this, like I can see what they need to do to get them to where they want to go. But after a certain amount of time, the realization is, but they're not willing to do what they need to do. So talk a little bit about that from your standpoint.
Yeah, whether it's that they're not willing to do the work or they just can't. Some people, it's not their skill set. And I'll be the first to tell you, when I interview, I hire the people I think aren't going to work now because half the time I'm wrong. I think someone's going to crush it and they're terrible. And then someone I'm not sure about came in and went top sales pro, right? So the only way to manage this thing is to have clear KPIs, clear measurable data, so it's completely objective, right? So now I'm not managing people, I'm just managing them to the expectations we set together on the way in. And then once you have a good amount of data in terms of what the averages should be, what the performance should look like, what the number of calls should be, what the number of whatever it is, it's like, this is the baseline, this is the expectation, we manage to that, And if it doesn't happen, it's just not an emotional thing anymore. Everybody's accountable to the same KPIs.
Well, and I think one of the benefits of what you're saying there, not only from a, talent retention, hey, do we move on? But it's also when you bring someone into the process, someone that's concerned, well, how do you know how much you're going to make? It's like, well, you don't know, but I do know that if you do these things, unless you are just absolutely god-awful at communicating with someone, like, you're going to have success. You just have to make sure you get enough at-bats, so you need to make sure you're doing these things. So I think there's, it's nice on a manager side, but it's also nice when you're, recruiting or developing someone that, hey, the reason you're at 40% of your goal is because you've done 45% of the work, right? So these things are adding up.
Yeah, for me, when someone says, how much can I make doing this? It's the wrong question. The question I would always ask is, what does your top producer make?
Yeah.
Right? Because I know for me, I'm going to look and reverse engineer whatever that top producer did, and I'm going to go beat them. Yep. Because it's not about the results, it's about the inputs required to get the results. I know that some people are going to say no and some people are going to say yes. I have no control of the outcome, but I can certainly control how hard I go on the inputs.
I love that. Now, while you're starting to do really well in the sales side, the business is going really well. For your own personal finances, you decided to start doing some additional investing outside into real estate and things like that. And this opened up your eyes to different investing opportunities. And so talk a little bit about, for you, the beginning part when you are starting to do that with your own funds.
Yeah, it was interesting. Other than sales and business, actually, I can say I've read more books on investing than anything else. It's what I was most interested in. Yeah. I actually didn't want to be in sales. I didn't want to do the food company. I loved it, but I knew it wasn't what I really wanted to do. I loved the investment world, just how big it is, right? I knew with what we were doing, thin margins, like you could only get so big doing that, right?
Yeah.
So started making some extra cash, and this is a huge mistake. Like when you have your first $5,000, it's not time to be an investor. And that's what we all do. We got our first $100, we open up a Robinhood account. Now we're trading options with $100, or we put it in crypto, and instead of working all day, we're just looking at the account go up and down 5 pennies, right? So you have to adjust your money mindset. So the one good thing I did do is I said, I know I want to be in real estate. So my now wife at the time, we had just moved in together, and we were like, all right, mission one, acquire the first property, right? So as the cash is accumulating, we're eating peanut butter and jelly, living in the apartment. We got one Nissan Altima, and then I got the company car, and that's it. And she's still in school. I made that first year when I got focused in sales like $90,000, and we saved like half of it. Wow. And bought the first property, right? So I saw the, I was reading Rich Dad's Guide to Investing, The Lifestyle Investor from Justin Donald. I love that book. And I was just like, real estate seems to be the path. But at the time, I was only just buying a primary, and my plan was I'm going to live in it in a year and then buy another one and just keep that process going, right? And then I started trading stocks, learning about the bond market. I was just so curious about all of it, crypto. I remember we were, after hockey in men's league, this is probably in 2012, 2013, something like that. One of the guys was like, have you heard of this Bitcoin thing, right? Yeah. And I remember buying it through a weird exchange. If I had only held it, right? But yeah, so it was just learning, trading. The accounts got bigger. We bought more real estate, and I basically would just invest in stocks and whatever with the cash until we had enough to go invest in something bigger.
Love it. Now, in the real estate space, there's a lot of different ways to invest your money, and you can find people that say single family is the best. You can find people that say multifamily is the best. You can find people that say both of those suck, you should be in commercial, right? I mean, and I think sometimes there's so much information out there today that that in and of itself prevents you from even starting with one of them, because you go, well, how do I buy a 16-unit, apartment complex when I can't even afford one, rental? Right. and I'll never get there, and so you give up on it. But talk a little bit about that for you, just being willing to step into it. And once again, you did your research, you read books, right? But just talk about stepping into it, and a part of that is just learning as you go, and then a part of it is having a vision for the long-term future and just understanding the steps it takes to get there.
Yeah. So to your point, there is no right or wrong piece of real estate to buy. It is, what is your competitive advantage? What are your skill sets? I know people that kill it in single family. I know people kill it in multifamily. I know people that are even killing it in office when that industry is getting destroyed. Industrial seems to be incredible for a lot of people. Some people are great at raising capital. Some people do it themselves. You got to figure out like what's going to be great for me, right? So I used to be in the mindset of no, like all of this is so I can eventually be a multifamily guy, right? And then I started realizing, going on all these podcasts and events and meeting all these people, there's people worth $100 million that never touched multifamily that did real estate. So there's no right or wrong way to do this thing. I think it's finding out what your identity within the space is and then leaning into that.
I love it. Well, your guys' business continued to do exceedingly well, and then when the pandemic hit, if I understand correctly, skyrocket in value, and that created the opportunity to exit the business. So talk a little bit about, those conversations. I think for so many people, the exit of the business is one of the most soul-searching questions, right? Well, if I exit it, then what? But talk a little about, the decision to exit and how that kind of came to be.
Yeah, the reality is I never believed, and neither did my dad, that was an exitable business model. It was a nice cash flow engine. It just didn't have the margins and scale, to exit it. And then everything changed when the pandemic hit. So it was not even a thought in our minds that we were going to sell that business. It was, this is going to get turned over to you someday. It's going to be yours for the next 20, 30 years. And then all of a sudden, overnight, the whole world was in the market for what we did. So what that allowed us to do was take the marketing spend to zero. Now the margins are increasing. Now we're moving to a Zoom sale from an in-home sale. So now we don't have all these company cars on the road driving from house to house, right? So then there's more margin. All of a sudden, we got a valuation here. Yeah. So, and it wasn't that we went out looking to sell it either. It came to us. There were people inquiring. Private equity is like, hey, we want to buy this thing, and they want to do a roll up. That's their bread and butter when you want to buy a $5 to $20 million business, and that's what happened. I just knew it was too good, and eventually, people wouldn't be going crazy and buying loads of toilet paper and whatever else was going on in the pandemic. Yeah. So I was like, we got to transact now, and I don't think we'll ever get a better valuation, and it was an insanely smart move.
I love it. Now, before we talk about the next phase, to rewind just a little bit, when you're going door to door and you have your reoccurring customers, one of them was in kind of, we'll just say marketing sales, and they recommend, well, maybe you should do a Facebook Live and you should start growing your social media presence. And many people have heard that. Very few do that. And you decided, all right, I'll look like a fool if I have to for a little bit. I'll give this thing a try. So talk about entering into, the social media world and really just kind of starting your platform.
Yeah, it was terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. I mean, it felt like the first time I went and knocked on a door. That's what it felt like. And thank God for Debbie Kale, because she was like, get over to my house. When I get my delivery, we're going live. And it's like when she was my best customer ever. So if she sees this, I'm going to send it to her. But literally the best. An incredible family. We got to know them really well. She really helped me out there. So in terms of social media, seeing the success that came from doing that and the referrals, and even though you're never going to feel good looking at yourself on camera, you're never going to like it. Even if you do build a giant platform, you're still not going to like it. So again, it's just back to just embracing these things you don't want to do, doing it anyways. If you got the success leaves clues thing, she was crushing it in network marketing with social media in that 2015 to 2018 timeframe when I got started doing it. So that turned into, okay, we're building a Facebook group for all of our customers. I was going live in there every day, giving the education about the farming and all that stuff. And I come to love it because the audience grew. They referred all their friends. So before I even started an Instagram page, I had done this on Facebook for several years and built a big community there. So, and the rest was history. So when the exit happened, and I was like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I was like, but I know this social media thing is a real thing. I got to figure out how to scale an Instagram brand. And that's when I hired the guys who are now my partners.
Absolutely. So, talk a little bit about how you and the gentleman that are partners, how that relationship came to be.
Yeah, I think this is a great lesson of knowing where you are in the food chain. In that world, I was brand new. I was nobody, right? In my space, I was the GOAT. But I recognized that these guys were literally 7, 8 years younger than me, and they were making more money than me.
Yeah.
So, and they're doing it from their phones, right?
Yeah.
So I just got on a Zoom with them. They're like, "Hey, we've got this event," and I had started a health coaching company. I thought that's what I was going to do next, and they're like, "Hey, 10 grand, you will get a speaking spot. You come on the yacht day, VIP." I just wanted to do business with these guys so I could get close to them. So I did that, and that was a lot of money for me at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember being on the yacht that day. I decided, we're talking. I decided, I'm like, all right, how do I get closer? I hired them to do marketing for my health coaching company. And, that actually did pretty well. And then they were launching a hedge fund. And I'm like, now that's actually the wheelhouse that I wanted to be in. So I was like, all right, I'm going to wind down this health coaching company, transition my brand into being a capital raiser, and go into the next, big boy sales, 100K and up. So that's another thing, is graduate from where you are. Don't become great at selling 5K products and then just hover there the rest of your life. Get uncomfortable again to a bigger product.
I love that. Now, as you talk about, relationships, I think something that you mentioned that you did strategically, which I think is very unique, is you would do masterminds or go to events in sectors that you weren't in or didn't necessarily have a desire to be in, but for the connection part of it. Because typically you go to a technology conference and everyone there is talking about AI. And it's like, well, that's great, but it's not unique. Everyone's talking about the same thing. Whereas if Justin's there, he's going to be able to talk about something that is completely different because AI is not his lane. And that makes you stand out. So talk a little bit about, what your kind of original game plan was there, and then maybe the execution of it. We've all been to an event where you can just tell someone's there to sell themselves and, create business. And there's nothing wrong with that, but if it comes across that way, there's something wrong with how it's going to work out for you.
Yeah, and this is why building the personal brand first is the ultimate networking tool, and it's the key to turning your in-person networking into dollars, right? So I decided, first of all, it was on blind faith and curiosity. Like, that's what it's going to be in the beginning. You pay, for these VIP tickets, it's like, each one, it's like $5,000 here, 10 for this one, right? But it's like, I'm not going to go GA. I don't need to meet the guys in GA. I need to meet who's sitting in the front row, who's mingling with the speakers. Like, I just knew I needed to get close to people like that. And I think the ability for someone to spend money without having any clue if there will even be an ROI is the difference of getting a huge ROI, right? So that's what I did. I was just meeting a ton of people. Hey, what's your Instagram? Follow me back, right? Now I got you forever. You're going to be in my story views. You're going to see my content. And if you're in the market for what I'm doing, goes to a Zoom meeting, right? And all of a sudden I'm raising capital from all these high-level people. We're doing collaborations. They're saying like, hey, come on my show, do this. And before you know it, in less than 12 months of literally having to reinvent myself out of nowhere, I did 10 million in revenue through my Instagram in less than 12 months.
Yeah. I mean, that's decent.
I think so. It was way more. If I had just been able to do 1 million, I would have been over the moon, because I was investing in something with no expectations. I just knew that I had to try.
I love that. I love it. So, as you mentioned, you and your partners have kind of moved into the hedge fund space, which, once again, there's a whole bunch of relevance in that, but it's a very niche market, right? I mean, you have to be an accredited investor, which means there's certain either income limits or net worth limits that one has to go into. So going into any business is hard, but then when you say, I only have this sliver of people that can even be a part of my business, the beauty is it makes you really finite on who you're looking for. The downside is that there's only a finite number of people that can utilize Justin's business services. So talk a little about that, because you had been in a business where essentially everyone was a candidate, right? I mean, as long as you could afford a freezer and the meat package, which is a lot more people than what it takes to be a credit investor, versus now you're like, hey, I'm in this very small margin, network of people, but it's really big opportunity.
Yeah, so you got to get really niched and targeted, right? So again, this is where most people, the difference of why we're so successful on social media and other people aren't, right? The natural thought process would be, if I want to raise capital, I'm going to send DMs to people who are accredited, right? Or maybe I'll look at who at the most expensive country clubs, who's checking in there, stuff like that, right? Cold DM is never going to raise capital, right? So DM investors are listening, right? And if I can get on those shows, now I could spend 1 hour and potentially have who knows how many leads, right? So I just went on a rampage of podcasts. It didn't matter if it was real estate, stocks, crypto, life insurance, whatever. If people who had money were listening, I wanted to be there. And that caused the long form content, the collaborations. I was everywhere, and my Instagram was full of inbound leads, right? So it was a combination of that, doing the in-person work, right, bringing those people into the brand, and then it just starts to monetize, and then you show people successful returns, they tell their friends, now you're getting referrals, right? So a couple months of upfront investment, don't get me wrong, I probably spent, I don't know, 30, 40 grand on a hope and a prayer, not knowing if it was going to turn into anything, and it did quickly.
Yeah. Well, and so with that though, I think your mindset on those funds is such a big deal. You didn't go in saying, well, I'm going to invest 20 grand, and if this 20 grand doesn't turn into 40 by the end of the year, like, it was a waste of money, right? You went in and you said, hey, I'm doing this because I believe in what I have the opportunity to do, and I'm just going to present it to whoever's listening. And then from there, hopefully it does end in my favor. So talk a little about just having that mindset, because I think so frequently people look at it as like an expense, right? Oh, like I spent all that money and I may never get that back. And it's like, you're right, you may not. I mean, it's an investment. It may not turn into anything. But sometimes, once again, that thought just in the beginning causes them to not even step into the realm to see what's possible.
It's the quitting too early thing that's why everyone fails. I mean, literally, right? We see it in our marketing business every month. People that sign up for a package 30 days in, they're like, well, I spent $1,500. I only made $500. It's like, yeah, no shit. It's month one, dipshit.
Right.
Like you're going to cancel? Like, I can't believe you have any success at all in 30 days. We call it this microwave mentality that's out there of people think they're going to get results instantly. And it's just the most selfish thing in the world to think that you're that great, that you're just going to start something and get results in 30 days. It's unbelievable. So to me, it's an ego thing, right? It's just, and this is where I had to check myself on not doing the social media. Where did I get so egotistical to think that anybody even gives a shit about me, that I'm even important enough to put out content and it's going to matter, right? So I think when you get a little self-deprecating in these things and you really humble yourself, you'll become something extraordinary out of just getting rid of your ego.
Yeah. I think that's so good. And I know you have your podcast, and you'll be episode like 310 or something in the podcast for me. And the thing is, I remember looking at views, after the first 20, and I'm like, man, I'm not anything like Joe Rogan. Like, I'm not even close, right? Like, in your head, you're like, oh gosh, millions of people will be download this, so you're great. And it's like, no, like 60 people listen to this, and you go, what the heck do I keep doing this for? But you get 300 in, right? And eventually, a lot of people keep listening to things. And so I think to your point, it's, having realistic expectations, but then also saying, I don't need this to pay off today. It just needs a little bit of time to grow.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I don't know, it's kind of like the food business, right? Like, why did I do that for almost 15 years when it was really hard and people were along the way offering me arguably way better opportunities? I was just so committed to figuring it out that I was literally saying no to better things because I didn't care about the results. I cared about the process so much. So That's it. Is if you care about the inputs more than the outputs, you'll be successful.
I love it. Well, Justin, are there any additional stories you'd like to share that have been pivotal to where you've gotten today and just, who knew in the moment moments?
Yeah, I would. I mean, like we took that hedge fund 0 to 20 million in 12 months, and somebody stole a bunch of money from us, and it became a gigantic issue. So for the last year and a half, I've been battling the hardest period of my life. A lot of people got hurt. A lot of people want to say things that aren't true. And for me, when I talk to people more successful than me, they're like, "Oh, that's the first time somebody stole 10 million from you? Like, cool, man. Welcome to the game." And I had to shift my perspective because I literally thought my life was over. Like,
Yeah.
I'm out of the hedge fund business. I'm done. My reputation's ruined forever. None of those things were true. And I had to go through the process, and we're a couple weeks away from our court date where we're going to get a $30 million judgment in our case, and yeah, just don't bet against me. Like that's like that Dana White thing, man. Like now I feel like that, and I think going in, this is just so valuable for everybody. Like everybody more successful than you has bigger losses than you. So when you take that big loss, like if you haven't taken a big loss yet, that really hurts. Right? If you haven't cried over it, you just haven't played big enough yet.
Yeah.
And you will come to appreciate that big loss because it's going to turn you into a different human being that you're really going to like.
I love it. Well, and I think, a great takeaway from that too is if you've had that moment or that event in life that felt like it was the end, it's never, as long as you make sure it's not, right? If you sit there and you hold on to that thing, it'll weigh you down for years, and yeah, you won't come out of it. But if you realize that, hey, this is just really a catapulting opportunity for me, it can turn into something great, and don't bet against it.
That's it.
I love it. Well, Justin, I want to say thanks so much for sharing your journey and just all the amazing things you've done and how you've been able to accomplish it. But excited to continue to watch your journey, and we'll probably be doing this here in 3 or 4 years, and it'll be from 60 million to 100 million and counting.
That's the plan. Hey, I really appreciate you having me on. This has been a lot of fun.